What is going on, everyone? This is the DC Incentives Podcast, episode 38. And we have a special guest today. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here as number 38. Okay. My name is Spshelle Faith Rutledge, so like Michelle but Spshelle, and I am a mental health education and outreach coordinator. I pretty much am originally from Denver, currently reside in San Diego, where I serve as the mental health educator, but primarily working with and for the Black community. And so, aside from that, I do hold like a master's in public health, and I do. I did work in like the hospital setting, now the nonprofit setting, and specializing in mental health, and currently am serve as the International Health Liaison of the Human Rights Forum of the American Public Health Association, and then locally out here, the American College of Healthcare Executives. But what I really like about being in this role as a mental health educator is, though I am not licensed, I'm trained, but then also have personal experience because before this, I was in the Marine Corps. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I did my time and have no regrets about it, but I also love the fact that I can tap in and relate to my people. But then, outside of just doing that, I've had experience dealing with PTSD and other mental health conditions. And so being able to be in a position to educate from not only the educational piece, what I know, but personally tap in with folks, it's been an honor and a privilege. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, let's go. Naron TC, anything?
I just want to say one. Sorry, Nara. I just want to say one thing. If you see me going like this, I'm coughing. I just got a slight cold, so don't mind me.
Understood. Take care of yourself first, foremost.
Oh.
I know that's right. Yes.
So, came prepared.
Absolutely.
All right, Nara, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd like to apologize to our audience because I'm the only one hatless, apparently.
Look, I just noticed. Look.
When did everybody decide to wear hats? I mean, I got a hood.
Hey, you got the hood, though. I was going to say, like, the hood, look.
But Nara, you got birds, though. You beat us at that.
I got, yeah.
You're the Animal Kingdom guy. What are you talking about? That's Doolittle over there.
Yeah, no. My question, just to tell us how you got started. Just talk about your origin story from the beginning.
Yeah, so pretty much how I got started was like I actually wrote an article about this where when I was around 7, like public health in general, which is basically I found this niche later on in life, in my adult life, but early on I was always had this niche to help people in some way, shape, or form. It started with my dad. So I like to say the story around the age of 7, 8. I was like coming home from school, and I don't know if y'all remember the program Dare. I don't know if y'all remember it or if y'all, I don't know the age group in the room, but Dare was a thing back in school where they, to prevent smoking cessation and such. And I remember seeing pictures of blackened lungs and such. And at the time, my father was smoking many packs a day and around me, and not because it's just because he didn't know, the effects of secondhand smokes, etc. And so long story made short, I remember running home and going to my dad, I'm like, if you don't do this, you kill me, and just being extra with it. But I, young child, and he loves me to death. And so I remember, even though this is hard for people to do, he quit cold turkey and hasn't went back for 20 plus years. And so I always remember that, and then part of it also, like, that was rough for him to do because he grew up in Alabama in the 60s, 70s. Okay. Birmingham to be exact. So, my grandfather still had the word nigger on his birth certificate type of thing. We're not far removed from the effects of racism and discrimination and so on and so forth. And so with that said, oh, that's cool. That comments, I'm new to this platform. Yes. Sorry, y'all. Yeah. Look, this other one with Smokey Bear. Look. Hey, Sabrina. Hey.
That's not with Smokey. Nah.
Yeah, so yeah, I ended up going to high school and stuff, and I too was like subjected to what I like to call like the school prison pipeline. I could have been, if that makes sense, but I ended up going to ROTC in high school, and I realized on how bad I wanted to apply to college initially when I was like 17, 18. It wasn't, like I really wasn't really given like the tools to. My parents did go to college and finish, right? Like they just worked for theirs, you know what I'm saying? My mom stayed at home. My dad was a custodian and uh uh pretty much put food on the table that way for 20 plus years. And so, for me, I was like, I forget this college stuff. Plus, I don't want to accumulate this debt. So let me, I'll join, the military. And then the Marine Corps sat with me because I liked what they stood for a bit. And I kind of liked the fact that they are considered, no offense to anyone, there's veterans that are Navy, Army and stuff, but they're considered the hardest branch to get through, you know what I'm saying? And so when I was like, let me go with the best and I'm going to do it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, thank you, Carlos. Thank you for being here. So, uh, pretty much, yeah, I joined the Marine Corps, and I had many great experiences. I'm not going to deny that. It helped me grow as a woman, became a mom. I'm a mom to a 10-year-old, John. And so to be exact, and I grew. I definitely grew and quick, but I also experienced certain traumas as a result of certain people that were in there. I don't blame the institution. I blame some of the few folks in there. And it was I had to medically retire. And so when I did, it was a little hard. I had my went through unstable housing situations, and I went through certain circumstances where I was dealing with a lot of court stuff, going through divorce, the whole nine. And it was really difficult. But I would say going to being in getting help when it comes to like getting having a psychiatrist and going to therapy, I it helped me tremendously. It seriously helped me tremendously. This is some of the stuff I didn't even think I needed to do until I had to do it.
Mhm.
And I was encouraged by my caseworker, who was also part of the whole team, to go back to school. And at first I was like, man, okay, I'll get an associate's. They said, no, get the bachelor's. You might as well go off in for it, because thankfully I had benefits to do such. So I went and got my healthcare bachelor's of healthcare administration, ended up working in a hospital setting, thought I wanted to be a doctor, a physician, until I realized I kind of want to affect people in a more massive way, which is what public health grants you the ability to do. And then I realized, I really was passionate about mental health, because, there was people around me. One story, and then I'll be done. There was when I ended up at Wonder War battalion or project out here in San Diego. I ended up stationed out here, which is why I'm still out here. But I ended up stationed, having to retire and recover at Wonder Warrior, right? And I didn't look like there was something wrong with me. That makes sense. So when volunteers came to kind of help us and do various things, it was interesting, because me and another colleague I actually ended up helping out, who was suffering PTSD really bad. Like he got the Purple Heart and everything. In which, if you don't know, the Purple Heart is when you save lives. Like he got it really bad. And but when you look at us, it looks like there's something wrong, right? Because you expect someone who comes from serving to have missing limbs and such like that. But the pain, you can get disabled just having a incurring mental health condition. So that led me to think like, yo,
Mm.
there needs to be more advocacy when it comes to this stuff. And another thing I want to say is, PTSD isn't just limited, which I plan to talk about in my presentation, limited to the military, which this may be cliche for some people to hear, but some people maybe grew up in underserved environments, underserved as a result of systemic racism and various other things like white supremacy. But like people grew up in underserved neighborhoods, having to survive however they feel, and seeing their brothers, sisters get shot in the street, stuff like that, can incur just as much PTSD as being out in the Middle East, or experiencing military sexual trauma, stuff like that. And so, when I helped this guy out, that became a close friend to me until we kind of parted ways. I remember just realizing like, yo, he was fine up until he didn't have support. His wife was divorcing him at the same time because she couldn't understand that he wasn't exactly the same. And it's like, it led me to get into the work I am in now, like getting people to understand, like, hey, this is a mental health needs to not be so taboo, especially in underserved communities, especially in this case, talk about the Black community. And there needs to be a discussion, and it needs to be more than just me doing it. It needs to be more of us doing it, and reducing the stigma centered around it, because we're losing too many of our sisters, our brothers, just like we've seen in the news recently with, you know, um, a few folks that I have planned to mention, dying by suicide. And that's not limited to just anyone. We see famous people doing it, right?
Mhm.
Because people are suffering in silence or depressed or don't feel they have the support system they need. So
You are a warrior.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And I can hear in your voice, like you are passionate about this. Like the little, like I know recently, I think it was Miss America that just
Yes,
committed
that's who
suicide.
I
Yes.
was thinking of.
Yeah,
Yes, she was a Miss America.
yeah, and it's just crazy to think how she even did it too.
Yeah.
One of my questions is like, with you being in the military and stuff like that, and especially as a black woman, how was you treated during those times?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. As a Black woman in the Marine Corps, one of the most, we're first to fight, first and foremost. And this is not just
Mhm.
limited to me. There's, just serving the military, period, as a woman, but then a Black woman. I did have my experiences, which were positive. Like I said, I will never dismiss the entity itself, the Marine Corps itself. Like I grew a lot, and I appreciate some of the leaders that I did have, and then there were others, which sadly were didn't treat me as well. Like I would say, there was, I experienced, discrimination when it came to like my hair. Like, yeah, there was regs, so there's regulations for everything. If you don't know, then now like even when it comes to the size of our braids. And I remember my braids were a reasonable size according to the order, because there's an order for how, yes, we're here. But I was told that I would get written up if I didn't change my style and quick. And it just various things like that happened throughout my service that others didn't really have to worry about too much, right? But then outside of that, military sexual trauma was a thing. Harassment. It's interesting because I'm not the only one that will agree with this. There's many other women that can contest to this. You don't realize how much some of the harassment you had to deal with and navigate through until you're out and people are like, yeah, that was a lot. You shouldn't have
Mhm.
had to deal with that. You shouldn't have had to
Yeah.
do this X, Y, and Z. And so I would say it was I found myself feeling the need to prove myself almost 24/7. And I did, granted, like I earned my black belt in Marine Corps martial arts. So going above and beyond. As a woman, I felt the need to go above and beyond because it's mostly men in the Corps, and it's very masculine, if that makes any sense. And there was not a whole lot, like you could tell that there's certain things that weren't really um planned out well for a woman. Like, for example, I ended up having the privilege and honor to serve in a as a group, to serve alongside um, a military police in this regard. And at the time, it was like we were just helping people at the gate, like ensuring that no paraphernalia and stuff came in. But at the time, I had to wear certain gear, and it wasn't made for me. Like there was just no gear made for me. And so it was almost at the expense of having my back pain, stuff like that. So I'm hoping by now it changed, but at the time, over 8 years ago, this is some of the stuff I had to navigate through. I shot well. So we get badges for shooting well, like experts marksmen and stuff. And in the Marine Corps, you have to be a rifleman first. And so I remember out shooting a range, and certain men hated on me a little bit, like, oh my gosh, you think, well, stuff like that. And I had to brush it off, hold my own. But it's a lot to do when, it's a lot to do. And hey, what's going on? My sis, Sade Burrell, she was just on one of y'all podcasts is on here. What's going on? But yes, so pretty much to wrap up, it was interesting an experience, nevertheless. And I found myself, even after getting out, helping other military vets. And to this day, I do when it comes to benefits and stuff, because I feel we rate it, because everyone who serves and makes out the military, men or women, I will say, it's not easy. It's rare. It's a lot on your body. It's a lot on your mind, your mental, right? And yes, look, like Sabrina said, it's not easy being a woman in a male-dominated field. They always want to have a cockfight, and that's just the facts.
It's called, like
The
Coach
facts.
Spade. Yeah, Coach Spade.
The facts.
Can't deny
Like
that.
the stuff
Yeah.
that, like and then being in spaces where it's almost forgotten about that there's a woman in the room. Okay, that's how I'm like, it's very interesting, but like nevertheless, I was happy to honorably discharge, but it wasn't easy. And I know others can contest, because there's other fields that are male dominated. Heck, I'm currently in a doctoral program, God be with me, because I'm only taking it 1 month at a time, pursuing a doctor of behavioral health at Arizona State. But it's more so to understand systems and at the executive healthcare level, if that makes sense. And even when it comes to healthcare executives, it's male dominated. So it's very interesting spaces to be in. These male dominated spaces. There's so much we have to navigate through and code switch and all the things.
All right, let's go.
Okay.
So
All right.
before we get to sharing your screen and
Yeah.
you just go and drop gems on the public, is there any more questions anyone have to say, or anyone any more questions?
No,
I'm sorry,
I'm excited. I'm excited for this chart. I probably have questions after you show us your diagrams.
Okay, yes, for sure. And there might be some I skipped through just because I want to make time for questions that you had, because I feel like that's more important, and I really like that. So I will share my screen because it's part of I'm doing this as part of work. I did say that I have to do say some disclaimers in the beginning, like this is paid for by the county. I'm on Kumeyaay territory, and then move forward from there. Stuff like so. So let's go. I can share whenever y'all are ready. If there is no more questions,
we ready.
All right,
Ready.
Let's do this.
Let's waste no time. Okay, window. Boom, boom. Let me make sure this is the right window. Let me see. We're gonna see in a moment. Yes, it is. All right. So let me pull up my other part real quick. I really like this platform. I'm getting the hang of it. I have never used it before, but let's.
Well, we used it.
Hey, I love it. Okay, so today I'm just going to pretty much break down best practices when working with the African American Black community. It's Black History Month. We know this, but this is something that needs to be acknowledged and taken into consideration every day of the year. Period. And so. Just some disclaimers. I already introduced myself, but I am part of a program out here in San Diego that's called Breaking Down Barriers. And the purpose is to reduce mental health stigma and discrimination for communities that are underserved. And it is a program of Jewish Family Service. And we serve people of all faiths and backgrounds. And it's one of the largest nonprofits. And then this is my team. So we each primarily work with a specific group. So Brianna with the Latinx community, Middle Eastern community, me, the African American Black community, the LGBTQIA plus community, Asian Pacific Islander community, as well as the African refugee community. And we want to normalize conversations about mental wellness so everyone can thrive, which is what we're doing here. And this needs to be not only on a statewide scale, or on a national scale, but on a worldwide scale. So for everyone watching, I hope you're paying close attention, and this benefits you wherever you're at. Quick line of acknowledgement for where I am. Just want to respectfully acknowledge and recognize responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, and acknowledge that San Diego County resides largely in Kumeyaay territory, but also want to recognize the other tribal communities that are here. All right. And so I already did introduce myself, so I won't go into here, but I do use she, her pronouns for those who are interested in knowing. Marine Corps veteran. I did mention before, but I am a doctoral student myself, just like my sis that's on here, and many others that are out there. So I'm a student, I'm a mother, I'm a community worker and advocate. So today, I want to break down who we are, African American Black community. What does it mean to be African American Black? All right, mental health through our lens, and some statistics, solutions, and resources. And I want to acknowledge, as you all may agree, this presentation does have many good general guidelines. However, it should be noted that some of the communication styles described may not represent the entire African American Black community, because in all generalized styles, we realize that there are differences between subsets of cultures as well as individual differences. And we can't be put in a box. Simply put, we're not a monolithic group, and I'm going to be saying that throughout. Also, some of the uh, information that I am going to be using is derived from current studies, but also one that was done on a statewide scale, which California is a major, really big state, but it was this study that was called "We're Not Crazy, We're Just Coping with a Crazy System," but it was paid for by the state of California under this policy called the Mental Health Services Act, in which pretty much surveyed multiple African Americans throughout the state. That included professionals, included individuals who were underserved in some way, shape, or form. And it was with their voices involved in this 300-page study, and also doctors and psychiatrists and such that identified as Black or at least understood our plight. And so a lot of the information is derived from the community, the voice of the community, and professionals that identify as the community. Just to say. All right. And so, just to begin, um, I wanted to do an activity with you all. And I'm hoping this works on the podcast. So we're gonna see right now. But when I pull up the next screen, I want you all to kind of be thinking. You don't have to write it down. You don't even have to close your eyes. But the names that pop up, and even the people that are participating in the podcast right now, I want you to tell me the first word or the first image that pops into your head when you see these words, like the first image that pops into your head. Um, and so it's a little activity. All right, y'all ready?
Naron's good with this. Naron is definitely good with this.
Okay, let's go. Okay, so and we can just go down the line. So first words that pops to your head when you see these words. So stockbroker.
Money.
Money.
Or first image of a person that pops up.
I think of suits, red tie, glasses, fancy shoes, and a fancy watch.
Okay. First person that pops to your head, image wise and color, all that. Engineer.
I think of rolled up plaid shirt sleeves. I think of glasses again. I think of a pencil. I think of like a big white sheet with designs and numbers that I can't really figure out.
All the things. Okay. What about college student? And I'll say, go ahead.
All right. Now, does this only have to deal with what somebody looks like, or
in this case, it's the purpose is to what someone looks like. So we're being transparent, and hopefully this is a safe space for folks. Because to be straight up, when I first heard stockbroker, I thought of a tall white man with black hair. When I first seen college student, I thought of someone young with curly hair.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So the same thing for me with college students. I'm thinking big book bag, young, crouched over a book.
Okay.
Yeah. And then that problems.
The last two. All right, the last two: politician, then basketball player. First image pop your head. Person, whatever.
All right. When it comes to basketball player, I think of a handsome guy named Nyron. I don't know.
Hey.
First person that comes to mind. And when I think of a politician, I think of, again, like a rolled up sleeves, white collared work shirt. I think of that person standing in like a public arena, like a
Yeah.
stadium, or maybe even a packed bar. I think
Mhm.
of
I love the detail. This is the most detailed in this activity. Yay! Good.
yeah,
Okay.
those are the things I think of.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay. So I usually do this activity, and like usually I have it like, stock worker first and engineer, go down the line. But the whole purpose of it, I usually do it with individuals, and I encourage people. And oh, I should probably see. Naren hasn't changed. Look, look, look. Hey, go. That's
Right on
funny.
the money.
Look. I love it. Well, I always do this activity with others in the room because the purpose of it is to bring to light that we get stereotypes from many different places, right? And our experiences influence our biases, which is prejudice against or in favor of one
Mhm.
person or not. And our experiences stem from our interactions we've had, television we've watched. It's just how our brains work, right? And
Yeah.
so now that we are aware of our biases based on this activity, does it make us, just because, like, for example, I thought a stockbroker would be a tall white man, or basketball player being LeBron James, or the late Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. Does it make us racist? Does it make us sexist or ageist, right? And
Mhm.
so my whole point when I use this, especially when people who identify as whites use this, or identify as Latinx, or just other groups, my from my professional standpoint, I say that the thought can manifest into those things if left unchecked, and influence the way we speak to a person or treat them or care for them. So, such as in a healthcare related setting, or when we're psychiatrists or therapists, right? I say, there is this issue with, for example, what we're seeing now with Black women in childbirth, right? This thought that we can tolerate pain more so than other groups, right? And it is completely false in every sense of the word, because we're most certainly human, right, first. And so that these people who are serving or treating Black women, for example, in childbirth, or assessing people in the mental health, psychiatrists assessing people who identify as African American, Black, already, if the people already have these preconceived notions or thought processes, and it comes out into their work, and it causes them not to have causes them not to have adequate care, then that is a problem at that point. Like, so I always recommend, after doing this activity, for each one of us to, check our biases at the door, and really, in our respective capacities, no matter what it is we do, really properly serve who is in front of us, and do so with equity, and minus, and so even if we have these thoughts, check them, and make sure that you're not providing inadequate care. And so, like, something I also want to share with the world is the differences between culture competency and culture humility, in my professional opinion. Because nowadays, when it comes to a lot of nonprofits, there's this tendency to think that, like, it's more of a requirement now to have cultural competency presentations or trainings, which is pretty much 3 hours of talking about a specific group or culture, and then, check mark, you check the box, you're good for the year. And I want to encourage culture humility, and it be a consistent, lifelong process, pretty much, because culture competency, the term implies that it's possible to hit an endpoint in learning about a minority culture, or a quantifiable set of skills to know when working with diverse clients. A culture humility, on the other hand, implies the lifelong process of focusing on self-reflection and personal critique when working with another group. It goes beyond knowledge, and it places a greater emphasis on openness and empathy to those who have different cultural background than your own or our own, right? And so, um, all right, we're gonna dive into who the African American Black community is, but I want to start off by one of my favorite quotes of what culture is, by Wade Noble's 1966 of African Psychology. The vast structure of behavior, so this is culture, the vast structure of behaviors, ideas, attitudes, values, habits, beliefs, customs, language, rituals, ceremonies, and practices peculiar to a particular group of people, and which provides them with a general design for living and patterns for interpreting reality. And so I really like that. So I'm going to dive into a little bit of history. And I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible because that's a whole nother session for a whole nother day. But I like to give a little bit of terminology at first. And this is where, people can agree or not. But I do my best to describe the difference or similarities of the African American Black community. So, what does African mean, right? So, tend to be a person born on the continent of Africa. And I'm sure you all gotten this question too, like what's the difference between Black, African American? Well, I tried to describe it here. African American implies a person of African origin, usually born in America, an American citizen and descendant of enslaved ancestors. I know I had my own brothers and sisters once tell me that some of us are also indigenous to this land, so want to acknowledge that. Now when we say Black, Black is an ethnic group of Americans with total or partial ancestry from any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Negro, right? Considered mostly derogatory today due to being too close to the infamous N word. However, some Black elders around the nation and probably in other places still self identify as Negroes because it's preferable to its predecessor colored. People of color mainly means doesn't identify as European or white. African diaspora, I'm going to briefly talk about that, but the term implies the Atlantic slave trade, transportation of slave traders of enslaved African people, mainly to the Americas, so South America here. And then Black Lives Matter, right? So Black Lives Matter is a modern day international activist movement originating in the African American community that campaigns against violence and systemic racism towards Black people. And I like to note when talking about this because I once had a person who identified as European or white object or not understand, the difference between Black Lives Matter, why not all lives kind of thing. So I said, Black Lives Matter does not imply that all lives don't, but simply put, due to the evident disparities Blacks experience across multiple socioeconomic sectors, it is stating our livelihood matters and should always, right? And so before I dive into the historical piece, I want to know if there's any questions y'all have or anything, because it's going to get a little deep. And then I'm also going to show a video, and then I want to hopefully have a little bit of dialogue around that video.
This is good. This is good.
No,
I would just like to say,
this is good.
Like for the first time ever, I'm just like sitting here learning. I'm not even. There's no questions for me to ask yet. It's just,
Yay!
I feel like I'm in college right now. I'm just like, yo, she really got this really section really nice. Like, I'm just sitting here like, I get my education today. I'm sipping my tea.
Yes.
This is really nice.
On a Sunday about some Black. Look. Okay, so let's go.
Happy Black History Month, people.
Yeah.
This is
this is your show today, by the way. You the captain of the ship.
Let's go.
We're just the crewmates at this point.
Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. So to start, I want to say I'm gonna do a brief history lesson. So and please, the audience, whoever's online, feel free to add if you would like. I only was able to fit so much into a short time period about African American history, but the whole purpose of even talking about history is to tie it into today and why our history matters. So to start, the peoples of Africa, especially West Africa, had rich and diverse histories and cultures centuries before Europeans arrived. So, our history didn't begin with slavery, okay? It did not begin with slavery. Before Europeans arrived, Africans, our ancestors, had kingdoms and city-states, each with its own language and culture. The empires were large and powerful, with monarchs heading complex political structures, governing hundreds of thousands of people. Art and learning and technology flourished, and Africans were especially skilled with medicine, So our ancestors were skilled in medicine already, mathematics, astronomy, as we know it today, and then more, right? And then the way we influence other things, music, in every sense of the word, fashion. To this day, people trying to appropriate. That's a whole nother lesson for another day. As a reason, because a lot had came from us. We were flourishing, and continue to, despite many of the ways our culture was stripped from us. So during the 1600s, was one of the largest migrations in human history, and it happened through one of the first African diasporas, which we know, the slave trade. Right, Africans were sold into slavery and shipped throughout Europe, the Caribbean islands, North America, and over nearly 4 centuries, 3 to 4 million Africans were forced into migrating to their new homes. Right. Later, various other migrations happened because of displacement, because of political views, famine, and rivalry between various African ethnic groups. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And although the African diaspora forced Africans out of their homeland, many managed to retain many of their traditions, right? The family views and culture, while still being able to successfully integrate, well, while being able to integrate into America. So, no longer needing to be forced into migrating north, countless African people later longed to be part of this American dream. We're already here, right? And so that took place. But moving on to the 1700s, there was the continued rise of white supremacy with the Naturalization Act of 1790, which pretty much restricted citizenship to any alien being a free white person who had been in the US for 2 years. So pretty much it left out indentured servants, slaves. And so I do want to note that, at first we start off as indentured service, and then they just made our ancestors slaves. And outside of that, indigenous Native Americans were also considered slaves, poor whites, but we were treated I would say very just as bad, of course. So this Naturalization Act left out indentured servants, slaves, and most women, period, overall. So though this took place, there were still anti-slavery movements, and I say this because um, you know, despite this happening and the white supremacy and others trying to strip our culture, we have this resiliency about us. And I use that word to try to highlight our strength and our tenacity, but then also at the same time, I want to note that we shouldn't always have to be resilient. You know what I'm saying? We deserve dignity, equity, and healthcare and education and everything, but do just because we are resilient and we're going to continue to be because that's just who we are. I do want to note that it should have to always be. Okay, so during the 1800s now, the abolishing of slavery took place. And I like to note that it wasn't overnight. All right. It needs to be acknowledged that the abolishing of slavery was a process between 1855 and 1870. And during this time was also the Civil War, where Blacks had a choice to either fight in the war or remain slaves. Okay. So which one would you pick? This was also the era where Blacks have been given the right to partake in government, such as was the case for a man by the name of Aaron Revels. He became the first African American senator during this time. And the right to partake in government, however, was soon stripped away. And the 13th Amendment was also created, which stated neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. So many of us acknowledge that the 13th Amendment is a modern form of slavery, right? And so moving on to the 1900s, like I said, I can only speak so much about our history, but the 1900s, Jim Crow laws caused many Blacks to venture out to major cities, still economically deprived because of redlining that still impacts us to this day to an extent, right? So, wanting to just acknowledge these facts. Situations during the 1900s, such as the Tuskegee um, experiment, where Black men enrolled in syphilis research with the United States Public Health Service study in Alabama from 1932 to 1972. People are still alive that were around during that time. So from 1932 to 1972 is one of the many examples of why there is distrust with the legal and healthcare system. These men were told upon completion that they would get free medical care. However, often the disease progressed sometimes to death, and they didn't see that. There was also the situation with Henrietta Lacks. She has a whole documentary. I would look into that. Her cancer cells advanced cancer research in general as we know it today, though at the expense of her life. So that's a little bit, and I'll dive into that a little bit more. Then began the criminalization of blacks from war on drugs. The three strikes law to minimize gun violence, resulting in mass incarceration, the opioid epidemic. So now we see the impact of the 13th Amendment with blacks disproportionately occupying the prison systems, charged with more serious offenses for minor crimes, disproportionality in homelessness, juveniles in custody, incarceration, foster care, poverty. And since the pandemic, these inequities have been highlighted, right? It's been a light placed on these inequities. And so, what I like to say is a future with cultural humility and with this understanding and this acknowledgement looks like quality health and equity, better thriving economy, right? If these things happen, reduction in health disparities, healthy well being, and autonomy for all, right? And
Yo,
so,
I'm sorry. I'm getting
yeah.
people who's dropping fire saying, "Yo, you about to change the game right now." You about yo, I'm getting so the reason why I'm down is because my audience is like, "Oh my god, who are you?" Like you're about to
Yeah.
change everything. I'm sorry, y'all, but
Let me tell you something. You know you spitting facts right now. I never seen Naron this comfortable.
Hey, I appreciate it. That must be a good comment.
My man is like this.
Well, I mean, I'm
He's
learning today,
like a
right?
proud father. Look at his daughter like, yeah, that's my girl. Like
Today,
you doing it.
today is
yes.
all about
Okay.
a day of learning. You know, these are things I've known, but I think it's important that our audience knows it too.
It's always good
Yeah,
to
that's what
hear
I'm
from somebody
saying.
else
Right,
too.
right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I love it, and I love being in spaces, especially all to, and it just reaffirms because like I love being in this platform that you even presented because this is the type of knowledge and information that needs to be disseminated and had. And what I do
Yes.
love about my job is in being under a big nonprofit is the fact that they have all these connections and ties, and they ask for these sessions like, hey, we would like a cultural competency training, and then I'm in a position where I am. You have no choice but to hear this knowledge and this understanding and listen and let it sink in. And so for folks that are, for example, anti-Black Lives Matter, for example, I've been in those spaces where you have no choice but to at the least listen, acknowledge, and then if you take it, if you want, you need to. If for some reason you don't, then just know that this is going to be a continuous conversation for as long as you live. If I have anything to say about it. So let's go.
That's right. That's right.
Okay,
Let's go.
Speak
let's
your
go.
shit. I'm sorry to
Let's
cuss, but
go.
speak your shit. Like
Let's
let's
go.
go. Yeah. Damn.
So this is just an addition that I had added because to really hit home the fact that we're still having to deal with why future with cultural humility matters. The defacing of the George Floyd statue that took place just last year and before. And then Henrietta Lacks, who I just mentioned, who advanced cancer cell research for everyone around the world. Okay. Her family just filed a suit October 21 last year because they still haven't been compensated. Okay, against the biotech company for Gila. That was what her cells were called, Gila cells, and it's obviously long overdue. The fact that the family is still trying to see compensation and such for this is why we need to keep on doing this work in our respective capacities and keep representing in various fields, every field. If I have they say. And then I know we were talking about this talk about mental health, suicidality. God, rest in peace, Alexander. This was another person who, even if you do have money and fame, we're still being impacted, right? Regina King's son died by suicide. God rest his soul. And also we didn't know he was hurting, and so I just really want to um put out there the this and so now what I'm going to dive into is something else that's also taboo in our community, but it's very important that I speak up, because when we talk about Black Lives Matter, and our health equity for all and such, we have our beliefs and upbringing, but it's important to acknowledge everyone that identifies as African American, Black. And so, like, I like to mention the LGBTQI plus in the Black community, right? And so, the last thing we need to do is discriminate within ourselves, right? So while the civil rights movement resulted in monumental legal changes for our country, just many years removed from slavery, African Americans continue to experience bias, discrimination, prejudice in general. The situation is even more severe, and it's proven time and time again, studies and so on, for the LGBTQI plus African Americans who live at the intersection of racism, homophobia, and transphobia, and face several critical issues: economic insecurity, being disadvantaged because of persistent discrimination, housing insecurity, lack of quality, affordable health care, violence, and harassment. So many trans blacks had died, get killed, abused, and a 2014 report on hate violence revealed that Black survivors of hate were 1.3 times more likely to experience police violence than their non-Black counterparts, and that's in general, but especially also the LGBT plus community. There's health inequities, so negatively affected when it comes to mental health conditions and suicidality, and then religious intolerance. So many of us have a background, Baptist, Kojic, what have you, some, or have a family member that is, or Egyptian ideology, some type of spiritual base to us, right, in some way, shape, or form, right? Um, African Americans identify with various faiths and traditions. The Christian church is just one, not all, but one that remains a source of both hope. And it will forever be. I love to incorporate our spirituality and the fact that prayer works, and it's important. And you can still seek mental health care and pray and seek God and so on and so forth. But it's also a place for trepidation for many who identify as LGBTQI plus and maybe believe in God but don't have a space, and therefore, that can contribute to depression and anxiety and incurring mental health conditions, and even having suicidal thoughts, behaviors, or attempting to it. And so this is just a few of the lives that were lost. The trans murder victims were 84% more likely they 84% trans murder victims were people of color, and 80% were women. And so I just want to show this because hate crimes have risen for our community in general, and this also includes the LGBTQIA plus community. And so this is a check-in. I want to know, let me see, did I include a video? I really want to get to this video to show you all. I don't even know if I can share screen in the volume. I'm going to check that. But I would like to move forward so that I could be able to show you this video and sense what you all have, and then provide resources to the community and wrap up in time. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, let's go because we're gonna have a discussion after this video. I promise you. So what does it mean to be African American Black? So, like I said, we're not a monolithic group. According to country of origin, Blacks are people of diverse cultural practices, languages, preferences, but share a common ancestral heritage, Africa. So we can't be put in a box. Like I said, we each, and that's one thing that's beautiful about us. African American culture. So when it comes to African American culture, the meaning of family does not have to mean strictly blood relative, and I'm sure you all can concur. But when speaking to others, there's many people who really don't understand this, right? So here we are with this space and giving you all knowledge about why what our culture means, because we have it. And I feel like that's what is amiss and what's not being acknowledged is the fact that African Americans, we have culture. When it comes to our language and when we're connected to our environment or around family or friends, we use common words or codes in a relaxed conversational manner that is often understood by us, as well as body and hand gestures, animate emotions, and our communication style. I learned that we talk to people using our eye contact at times, right? Which is understood that you're paying attention to what's being said and the person talking. Several people may talk at the same time, and this is what I learned. It's called talk over, because growing up Black, you don't know the terms and stuff, right? You just do it, right? You just grow up with it. But it's called talk over. But this interaction is pretty much viewed as engaging in the conversation or being a part of the discussion, or people may shout out words or expressions while another person is talking, which gives testimony, that you understand what the other person is saying, which is called talk back. And within the Black culture, verbal as well as nonverbal communications are ways of connecting to each other, the community, and the world. It is important to understand that enslaved Africans experienced an almost total loss of languages, cultures, kinships, bonds, religion, and even family function. And this social conditioning was extremely traumatic. It was extremely traumatic, especially since the losses were against the will of our people. The intent, okay, notice how I say that, was to keep us enslaved and in a submissive state by force and fear. And as a result, an entire system was created to reinforce the subjection of enslaved African people. Yet here we are, still we rise. Okay. Um, Now, based on the history we just learned and the cultural aspect of us, I want to leave you and everyone listening with four of the ways that history ties into today's trauma and ties into just today period. So trauma wise, we do still sadly see overt and subtle forms of racism that has attempted to damage our collective African American psyche, which the harm is manifested through the harm we've seen has been manifested through poor mental health and physical health, or family and relationship dysfunction, self-destructive impulses, when left unchecked. In which I'm in the field where we're addressing all those things because we no longer need to be in those to live that way. And so while it might not tell the whole story, it does help to explain some of the high rates of heart disease that are disproportionately impacting our community. HIV, AIDS disproportionately impacting our community. Hypertension, which has a study has been shown has been leaked for. There's a study of Black men in hypertension, and the study revealed that there's racism. There's a linkage between just solely racism being a contributing factor to the disproportionality we see in hypertension, obesity, crime, substance abuse, misuse, and other maladaptive behaviors. Also, I want to call out psychiatrists who are more likely to misdiagnose Blacks with things such as bipolar disorder or schizophrenic. Not saying that doesn't exist, because it does, but sometimes that there's, because of the lack of understanding, culture, and that discriminatory thinking, they're quick to diagnose us with more severe mental illnesses instead of anxiety, depression, undermine our IQ, those things. So, unfortunately, both ignorance and fear continue to try to play leading roles in perpetuating the stigma that those of us with no fault brain disorders face. And this stigma leads to underfunding of government programs for public mental health services. That needs to change. Discrimination by insurance companies. That needs to change. Lack of appropriate housing and employment options, and pervasive media portrayals of people with mental illnesses that identify as Black. We notice there's a difference with that in the media when we see the tabloids come out, and they present us as violent or dangerous or hopeless. So there are no, I want to say there are no human subspecies. It is a scientific fact that human race and the term racial groups are social constructs not based on biology. Race is a social classification of an interpretation of how people look. And therefore, it is not a gene. There's no biological base for the concepts of human race. But while race is a social construct, to be able to unlearn the harms caused from white supremacy, we need to be aware of racial dynamics and see color, because there's people who say, I don't see color. You need to see it. See color to reach equity for all. So this is the video I want to show, and I take it back because and I want to make sure that you all are able to hear it. So let me get this to the settings, audio. Let me see, automatically adjust mic volume. I just want to make sure. I guess I'm just going to start playing it, and then you can let me know if you all hear it or not.
Okay. Yeah,
Let's see.
our YouTube and Facebook family, just let us know in the comments if y'all can hear it when the video plays.
And for our listeners, just look up for the podcast video version to look at this video with us.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, let's go. Let me see. Oh, I have to click it from here, I think. Hold on. Let me see if I can play it. You can. And this is an
Okay.
ad, so you have pass. Can you hear it?
Hit the button again. Hit that button.
Okay.
To speak. Yeah.
You all can hear it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We can hear it. YouTube, Facebook family. If y'all cannot hear it, just let us know in the comments, please.
All right. So this is a gentleman. His name, as you'll see, is Philip Roundtree. Powerful.
When you look at me, what do you see? Now, I'm going to go through some of the things that I typically hear. To the very astute, I usually get I'm black, I'm bearded, and I'm strong. I also get I look like NBA superstar James Harden.
Yeah.
Almost definitely the poor version. I get hip-hop superstar, Emmy Award winner, Donald Glover, a.k.a. Childish Gambino. Yeah, that too, right? And last but not least, I get Curtis Jackson, a.k.a. 50 Cent. Now, one of my goals is definitely to get rich or die trying. I think Sally Mae is putting the emphasis on or die trying, right? But see, what I don't hear is Phil, you look like somebody that lives with depression and anxiety. Phil, you look like somebody that was suicidal for 15 years, every day, 5 to 6 times a day. They don't say, Phil, you look like somebody that was driving on Interstate 95, wanting to crash your car to end your life. No. Because see, here in America, when we think about mental health, we think about the homeless man who's walking the streets, talking nonsensically to themselves. We think about the white celebrity who takes their life via suicide. We think about the white mass murderer who goes into a high school and takes the lives of innocent children. Or it's usually your president who loves to tweet venom from the hip. But see, rarely does the conversation speak of a father of 2 kids, someone who possesses a master's in exercise science, a master's in social work, somebody pursuing a doctorate. Rarely is it a person of color. Rarely is it a black man like myself until now, because black mental health matters. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is black mental health and why is it differentiated amongst racial and ethnic lines? Black mental health are the individual and collective experiences that influence the wellness of a community. Trauma is the biggest influencer of black mental health. We're talking about historical trauma, slavery, Jim Crow, the civil rights movement, the Tuskegee experiment, up until present day trauma. When you see somebody that looks like you get killed in their home, rest in peace, both Gene. When you see somebody who's living with mental wellness issues get killed by the police, rest in peace, Laquan McDonald of Chicago, Illinois. Or when you see somebody that looks like you get killed by somebody that looks like you, rest in peace, Triple X, Tentacion. See, when we talk about trauma, trauma is unique to the individual, and I'm no different. There were 3 impactful traumatic situations that I've experienced in my life outside of the genetic predisposition, because my grandmother lived with schizophrenia. I harken back to being in 8th grade, 13 years of age. On the way to school, my mother has a nervous breakdown. She's crying. She's pulling at her clothes and her hair. She's cursing. I felt helpless because I couldn't help her, I couldn't help myself. And see, I was expected to continue to go into school that day and achieve. It's funny, when I first started telling this story, I told my mother, listen, I'm telling the story of when you had a nervous breakdown. And she said, "So that didn't happen. Now I know I'm getting older. I have a few grays, right? But I swear I remember that." And then she called me a week later and she said, "Phil, I didn't know you remembered that." As if I wouldn't remember the most traumatic situation that I've experienced in my life. And that typically happens. We're often expected to just continue on because we are so resilient as a people, because we do survive, and we've survived for hundreds of years. And I was expected to survive and go into school that day and perform. And I did. Because, like many of us, I learned how to suppress my emotions and my feelings. But what if I didn't? What if I went into school and I started arguing with peers and fighting? What if I started arguing with the teachers? What if I did criminalistic behaviors within the community? Would I be deemed incorrigible and unable to be in the school setting, in the community setting? Or would anybody care that I just experienced this traumatic situation that has impacted me? Fast forward to my 12th grade year, 17 years of age, January 2001. My mother said, "Phil, come downstairs." She said, "Phil, your brother Bobby died." And I started crying. That was probably the only healthy coping skill that I had at the time, right? Because being a product of the hip hop culture, hip hop tells me when somebody dies, you either go out and get some liquor or you go get a rest in peace tattoo. Well, I wasn't old enough to drink. That would happen once I got to college, right? But I went out and I got this rest in peace tattoo. As if that was going to do something, if that was going to take away the pain of losing a primary relationship. It didn't. And people ask me, "Phil, well, how did your brother die?" Say, the opioid epidemic is popular now. But in the black community, in the hip hop community, especially amongst black male, it's always existed. He was one who liked to use codeine and Xanax. I don't know what he was trying to cope with. I will never know. I went to school that Monday because I didn't have anybody to say, "Phil, stay home." Because my mother was going through it because she just lost her only child. And I went to school feeling all of this emotion. And I remember it like yesterday. I was sitting in computer class. Miss Williams, my computer teacher, came up to me. And I don't know what she said. She said, "Phil." She could have said, "Phil, what was the score of the Eagles game last night?" Let her have it. I blacked on her. I cursed her out. Why? Because I had all this built up anger, all this built up rage. Because, see, when we're talking about depression and anxiety for black men especially, it doesn't look like somebody laying in bed for 6 and 7 days on end. No, it manifests itself through anger and rage. I ended up getting suspended that day. And Ms. Williams and I were able to laugh at the situation years later because I was able to cope with it and understand what I was feeling. Again, it was a moment in time that impacted my life. My third and final story happened at Bloomsburg University in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. Again, we remember traumatic situations, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I call it the Jew story, right? Because when I go fill out job applications and it says, "Have you ever been convicted of a crime?" As long as it doesn't say misdemeanor or felony, I can ignore it if it says that. But if it says, "Have you ever been convicted of a crime?" I have to check it off. And then I put, "Well, it all started with a cup of juice." And then the employers, they laugh like, "Oh man." And I laugh like, "Ha, ha, ha. That's my life." So the Jew story is, I was coming from the gym to go get me something to eat. I got my food. I paid for it. Emphasis on pay. And you know how you go to McDonald's, they give you a cup and you can go to the fountain and get whatever drink you want. And I did that, and I tasted it to see if it was watered down. But see, when you go to a predominantly white institution like Bloomsburg University, it seems like they have all the minorities' names on a list. And the school police officer said, Phil, that's stealing. Mind blown. And me having this anger, this frustration that's built up over years of trauma, and me not being able to express myself in a healthy way, I blacked on her just like I did Miss Williams. Unbeknownst to me, that would lead to 20 plus charges. I ended up going to jail that night. I ended up getting expelled from school. I ended up doing a weekend in jail because, listen, they say you'll get judged by a jury of your peers. With the average age in that community being 60 and over, it wasn't going to be a jury of my peers. But I needed that experience. I needed it. And I needed it because it told me that, Phil, I have to do something different. I ended up appealing to get back into Bloomsburg University, and people knew me, so people wanted me back. And so I got back, and I was focused. One day, my psychology professor, Dr. Cambone Camara, God bless the dead, he said, Phil, come talk to me about anything, anytime. And I took him up on that. I went and talked to him, not to talk about school. I went to talk to him about a young lady I had been courting, right? And I wanted to understand, why did she want me? So I went to his office. I'm like, listen, I bought her sneakers. I took her to the movies. I took her to dinner. Well, my mom took her to dinner and all those things because I didn't have a job. Thanks, Mom. But he said to me, Phil, in life, you change to get something or to keep something. I'm like, man, what are you talking about? Little did I know that that would become my mantra. That I realized I had to change. I had to work on my wellness so I can be whole. It took approximately 10 years because that's the average length of time that they say somebody who lives with mental wellness issues, that's the time that it takes for them to come to grips with it and to seek treatment. For Black people, I think patients, they're no more. I go to therapy every week. Hi, Dr. Val. It's been so critical for me in my wellness because I decided to go from living to thriving. To my Black brothers and sisters, you too deserve to go from living to thriving. We no longer have to wear the mask. We're survivors. There's help now. We can get help and walk out there with our heads held high and get the treatment that we need so we can go from living to thriving. To my non-Black brothers and sisters, will you now view the Black person that you come in contact with and might be in a negative way and recognize that, you know what, they might have gone through something, or to see them when they excel, what they had to go through to get to that point? Or will mental health continue to be viewed in America as Kate Spade, as Anthony Bourdain, as Chester Bennington, as Robin Williams? Would it now include actors Sam Sarpong, Lee Thompson Young? Would it now include 10-year-old Ashanti Davis, who took her life because of bullying? Would now represent Emmanuel Sloan, who's the reason why I'm here, because at 19 years of age, he decided to take his life by jumping in front of a train. This isn't an indictment on you or on America. This is just a public service announcement that's stating that we're here and we deserve to live and to thrive. Thank you.
All right, so I know that was a lengthy but impactful video. I love to show it everywhere I do one of these because of how just the way that he Philip just talks about mental health and his experience and from a perspective, and then me as a Black woman, I'm speaking from my perspective and representing all of our communities as a whole, and Black women especially, but then him as a Black man and talking about mental health, because one thing that is a fact is suicidality is more often happen, for example, for Black men, um, um, especially. And so for him to have that vulnerability and be able to share with the world, I also disseminated his story and want to kind of like dissect that. What do y'all think? Or, reflections, because I was pretty heavy.
No, it was powerful. It was definitely
Yeah.
powerful. Everyone in the comments, what do y'all think? Y'all could drop it on the chat.
Well, I'd like to say that I liked how he explored different avenues of mental health. You don't always have to have some sort of official diagnosis
Yeah.
to experience any form of mental health. And his range from just talking about like the average man and how just being a father and things of that nature could affect your mental health was enlightening. You know what I mean? It shined a light on something that I think that we as a society overlook, especially in the Black community.
Absolutely. And the Black
Yeah.
community, it is big. Mental health is big in the Black community.
Yeah.
So
And especially, I could say for the Black men in the mental health community, we are lacking in that because we was taught to just be closed up, don't
Yeah.
express yourself. But thank God nowadays we are opening up more and more and expressing ourselves and letting our voices be heard because, like we spoke about earlier with the suicide rates, like the
Mhm.
highest suicide rates of all people is Black men,
Mhm.
and that got to change.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes,
powerful.
yes.
I can relate because many of them.
I appreciate it. And the way you dissect that, I appreciate y'all in the comments and your and all of the comments. I just seen them. So I just realized, oh, but there's two parts to this platform, so pardon me. But I appreciate all of your honest feedback. And taking it all into consideration, and I appreciate y'all engaging right now on the Sunday. Because regardless, at the end of the day, despite our views, this is a discussion that needs to be had, and this is a
Yes.
discussion that the world needs to hear and needs to see. And it's like to at least have the space granted, like DC podcast is granting, to have the dialogue is in itself powerful, because we're always, we're going to agree, and there's going to be areas where we don't. But one thing we all know is that our mental health matters, and it needs to be put to the forefront, and we need to be there for each one of another. And we all know that things need to change for sure. And so here we are, being a part of that, by disseminating education and information.
Mhm.
I love it. I love it.
I agree.
So without further ado, I want to dive into mental health statistics solutions, and also provide y'all with like some resources for you all that you can share with each other. And then I want to also just quickly articulate about talk about mobile crisis response team that has been started out here in San Diego, and that I hope is adopted, if not already, by certain places throughout the nation and the world. So mental health statistics and solutions, like I said, this is about derived from multiple sources, but mental illness in the Black community. So while rates of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation are increasing for people of all races and ethnicities, there are notable differences in those changes over time. And Black or African American screeners have had the highest average percent change over time for what is anxiety and depression. And I want to say for transitional age youth, so those that are, later teens, early adulthood, college bound, hopelessness has increased, and those feelings, have increased, and we need to just acknowledge it, address, so we can address it, right? So quickly, at the psychological level, it was reported that African Americans show significantly higher stress and range of life domains, so acute life events, financial relationship, life and job discrimination, and these were predictive of depressive symptoms and poor self rated health and functional physical limitations, and even chronic illness. And so another study had revealed that it was found that self-reported ratings of poor mental health were significantly higher among Black Americans, among peers. So, for example, among people suffering major depressive disorder, 57% of Black Americans experience chronic depression with more acute symptoms, compared with a rate of 39% among whites. Although African Americans report lower rates of generalized anxiety. We do report that. We show more severe symptoms and greater functional impairment with anxiety is suffered and left unaddressed. So, moreover, African Americans more frequently meet the criterion for post traumatic stress disorder than white Americans with symptoms persisting for a longer period of time. And so, 13.4% of the US population, or nearly 46 million people, in other words, identify themselves as us, Black, African American, and another 2.7% identify as multiracial, etc. And so this is just like taken I from this is from this year, from a study done previous year. As we see, of those of the 13.4%, 16% report having a mental illness in the past year. And let's also know that since this pandemic, a lot has been put to light, and there's been a lot of people going through depression, anxiety, the uncertainty. I believe I'll be talking with you all in the podcast again next month about those things. So, excuse me. So what does that look like? Because I could throw statistics at y'all all day. That is over 7 million people, so more people than the populations of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia combined. And what are the top risk factors? Homelessness, incarceration, and uh, being below the poverty line, right? And so, some of the mental illnesses in the Black community that have been reported more often diagnosed with schizophrenia, but often underdiagnosed with anxiety, mood disorders such as depression, substance abuse misuse,
Abuse,
and
yes.
PTSD. And in that video, what I want to point out is the fact that, depression doesn't look the same for everybody. It's not always laying in bed for weeks at a time. For those who have the privilege to, we still have to show up for work. We still have to show up for school. We still got to show up, but it can look like anger. It can look like having these fluctuations of moods, crying here and there, masking, what you're really feeling inside. And I appreciate um, what was just said. I think Nyron, you had said it, like, or TC, you had said it about how people, especially Black men, have this tendency to you're taught to mask your feelings and to put it asunder and to show up and and doing too much of that, though, what often happens, rarely, never, but what often happens is it comes out in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through substance misuse and abuse, or depression, anxiety. It comes out, or anger, such as what the video Philip was just saying. It comes out when it's left unaddressed. So when you need help, call somebody, talk to someone. I'm gonna reach out. We're in a day and age where we can have help now. It is available to us. And even if we don't have the privilege to see a therapist like within a week, 2 weeks, what have you, there are podcasts such as this one I'm going to share, and other resources that you could tap into today, right away, hotlines that even I myself have used. So some of the causes and is historical unresolved grief, post-traumatic slave syndrome. I would highly recommend people looking at that. Stunted development of racial identity and self-esteem, traumatic life experiences, illness or death of a family member, white supremacy, violence in the community, whether it be domestic, absence of a parent, racial profiling, microaggressions, stress, so financial problems from family relations, interpersonal rejections, or hereditary, so neurological disorders. These are still some of the other factors. And some of the so throughout America, there is seemingly still a lack of recognition that there is an African American culture, right? And we're saying there is, very much so. There is a misunderstanding, a lack of understanding that Blacks in America has created, and as a result, it has created a deficit of unmet needs. So that lack of cultural recognition needs to change. Acknowledge that we're here, acknowledge that our culture matters, and get to understanding us so we could be treated accordingly. Western training of psychotherapists, for example, focus on self as a basis of identity. And this orientation may not reflect the sense that us of African ancestry have of being connected to with a more communal sense of self through family and through community, right? And so I want to encourage psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, therapists, teachers, nurses, doctors, individuals in every field to really understand that. Or any everybody in the a field of health need to understand that there's more than just Western forms of psychological healing. We can use more alternatives. So faith based, using faith, our faith, prayer, bringing the community into the healing process, our families into the healing process, and then other things such as that, right? And so some of the barriers to service, and then I'll conclude with some identify solutions before I get some more of your questions. So some of the barriers that need to be acknowledged is there's not enough African American providers, and granted, not a lot of us are trying to accumulate all this debt. Like so,
Of course.
I definitely so there that's this is from the voice of the people. There's not enough African American providers. We want to be able to relate to who we share such sensitive topics with when we're in therapy, right? So that has to change, whether it be in the form of paying for college, more scholarships, more grants that are easily accessible. Okay. Stigmas, myths associated with mental illness. So we're trying to, I'm in the business of reducing and eliminating these stigmas because it needs to be talked about. Lack of health care, lack of knowledge or education about mental health have been barriers to service. Unequal treatment, funding or limited access, as well as long waiting lists, which I feel is a overall healthcare system problem in itself. Um, so some of the identify solutions: adequate screening with early intervention, having culturally proficient positive programs and interventions specifically identified by local communities. So the communities, our communities that already know us, that know our plight, that know what we need. Um, Alternatives, so alternatives to jails, prisons, and hospitals. So more community-led emergency response teams, which I'm going to dive in and give an example of here shortly. Funds directly to the Black community and organizations already doing the work. Holistic family-based community approaches, community support network that include collaboration with faith, family, culture centers, and empowerment groups. And then last but not least, valued community resources are some of the identified solutions that I'm so happy I'm able to put out there and share. And and so um, I want to I want to end off with some of the hotlines and directories that are suitable for people everywhere. So there is a program called Blackline, actually based out of New York. I have heard, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called Blackline. It's an unapologetic Black crisis line. It's a crisis line for, like, let's say you're mistreated by police or just in general you need support. The number is 1-800-604-5841, and we have it out here in San Diego, and they're trying to grow online. And there's wellness directories, so the Black Wellness Directory, therapy for Black girls, and there's also therapy for Black men. You can follow them on IG, but they have their podcast, which is very useful and beneficial if you just want to hear more information that's tailored to mental health and other topics, and some apps that are used, like for example for meditation, which I highly recommend doing, and for just having those practices that are from a Black perspective or people of color perspective is let's see, it is uh well, there is, let me see, I think I put it here. Well, there is the Kindred Medicine, Shrinkage Place, the Zen Care, and then on top of that, there's just crisis text line. So for those who don't like to just talk on the phone, you could do text hello to 741-741, and not just when you're in a crisis, but if you really are having trouble or struggling and you really don't feel like you can reach out to someone, I just want to really reiterate that there is help and it is free. You don't have to pay. And so to wrap up, before I get to your questions, I want to just show an example of an alternative to police, because what we're seeing in this country a lot of is people with mental health conditions, and when there is a crisis with them, people are calling the police, and it's not turning out well at all. Either their lives are ending, or there is discrimination in some way, and they're arrested. So I want to highlight the mobile crisis response team that has been rolled out, at least here in San Diego, and I think other places, and I feel should be is just one piece of the puzzle that can be that's being addressed. So it is a person support to anyone in San Diego County, for example, experiencing a mental health, drug, or alcohol related crisis. And so behavioral difficulties with youth and adults that concern close friends or family could be a reason why you call. A person is experiencing concerning thoughts, experiencing symptoms such as hearing voices. Any of these reasons is a good reason to call. And what a mobile crisis response team look like, at least here, and what I want to recommend that it looks like other places, is a mental health clinician, a case manager, and a peer support specialist. What is expected and what is happening here, at least, is an assessment is done, meaning the person where they are is done, and then a 30-day follow-up. So after they come out. And then here we have a phone number, which is 888-724-7240. But if MCRT is not the best option, we have another option, which is called the Access and Crisis Line, or Black Line. And so I'm going to stop sharing screen because I'm done. And I want to make a room for questions as we wrap up. And I want to just acknowledge everyone that's been here, listening to the podcast, and your feedback. I greatly appreciate it. And so I'm gonna, there we go. I was like, how do I stop sharing screen? And thank you. I love all the comments. Sabrina, Jason, everyone has been here, Nicole. Yes. So I'm
Okay.
available.
All right. So throw your questions in the chat, y'all, in the comments, Facebook, YouTube, your questions. TC, Nyron, y'all can go ahead. I do Jason Gamble, when you talked about the Black Lives Matter organization.
Yeah.
So we do have opinions.
Yeah.
What, Nyron?
I don't know. I thought there was going to be a controversy coming up.
No. It's not even that. But I'm gonna say this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm gonna just pull it up right here, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
Oh, look!
I feel like
the organization is a fraud, though.
So here's the thing, right?
Yeah. This is a important topic. Yeah.
So I feel like, and like I said, I don't want nobody censoring, right?
Yes.
But I do feel like we talk about the problem a lot. Too many years. What you have to understand is that, like, there's not going to be that, like, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all of them, right? That,
yes.
Like, we're not going to see them anymore. So now it's up to us as leaders, as ourselves, to do the progress and think of, okay, so how can I be the solution instead of talking about the problem? That's just my opinion.
Because I honestly feel like they left us the blueprints, basically.
Yeah.
You know, they did most of the work. It's now up to us is to take the torch and just keep on going.
Absolutely.
And the point now, and so I just say this one more thing. And the point now that our voices could be heard even more just because we have technology, sometimes, you know, it's better off we could just do something instead of this sitting there and be like, well, it should be this way, you know, like, just saying.
Yeah.
So Jason, if you want to talk in the comments, anything, feel free, you know, do whatever, any comments, questions, anything what you would like to say, feel free what you got to say. But I just think that we got to stop talking about the problem and focus more on solutions, because for years that's all we talk about is problems.
Yes.
So
Yes. I appreciate y'all saying that. And like I had said earlier, you know, this is a type of dialogue that needs to be had, because there's people that feel like Jason, there's people that feel like us. But I do agree with you, Diamond, that we do need to focus on these solutions. And like I said, we're not monolithic, right? We're not all going to think the same. We're not all going to completely act the same. But what does need to, where there, I do believe there needs to be a consensus, is we need to put our wellness and health at the forefront. If there's anybody at this point in time that is trying at the best they could to prioritize our wellness and bring to light the disparities that we've experienced for decades and decades that have caused historical trauma and intergenerational trauma, and they're in positions of power to be able to help with this and to influence policies which needs to happen and influence systems, so that we can actually get to a place of getting our reparations that we're long overdue for and such. Then I'm with it. I'm definitely appreciate it. And there needs to be a lot more of us, just like you said, Diamond, prioritizing the solutions. And especially with those of us willing to put in the work. I commend those that willing to put in the work, because the work is not easy. Trailblazing is not easy. Martin Luther King, obviously we see with him, Malcolm X, and others that did so at the expense of their lives. It's not easy.
Absolutely. Like I said, drop it in the chat, y'all. If y'all have any statement, any comments, any questions, just throw it. Nyron TC,
just for
talk
the
to me.
audience, I gotta tell the audience, just don't type about how beautiful she is, because
Oh
it's
my
like
God!
obvious.
Here we go.
I was waiting for it.
Obvious for the rest of the
Thank
room.
you.
Waiting
She's
for
a
it.
pretty woman, so we don't want to waste her time. We got a limited amount of time here.
Yes.
He's
I'm
been
so
waiting to say that
appreciating my
since he's seen
brothers.
you. He's just like, yes, today.
My brothers. I love it. Thank you. Thank you.
TC, you got any questions?
I did have one. I had to go back in the bowl because a lot just happened.
I love it. I love
I
it.
gotta lie. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say it, but like, yeah, like, nah, a lot just happened. So,
all right, Nyron, go ahead. Ask your million questions.
Okay, so you mentioned funding in your presentation as one of the things we can do to address the mental health issue in the Black community. Do you think there are any sort of government programs or ways that we could increase funding to support Black mental health?
I really appreciate that. Advocacy. So on all of our platforms, but then outside of that, like showing up to community meetings. Like I know I hear one of the things that we don't do much of, for example, is like show up to like the community meetings, even when they are made in the evening. For example, we talk about gentrification a lot, for example, right? And like funds that come to the community, funds like not being built up, but I know at least where I'm at, there's not too many of us that are showing up to the planning groups and to the planning meetings. So I say our involvement, because there's power in that, and I am a big person that is an advocate for the power in our vote, for example, too. So advocacy, writing our elected officials, and then voting for what we believe in that will help bring funds to our because it's still power in that. MLK, our ancestors and those that came before us fought hard for our right, for our rights to be able to have a voice and to vote in those various things. And we don't need to let that go asunder because we losing hope. There's still power to sway, just like we can sway elections, we can sway policies to come into our favor that bring the money down, and then having an understanding of where the money is and how to access it. So here I know having an understanding of when certain grants or certain county contracts get put out, establishing relationships with the people who disseminate those funds, and then like there's just power in numbers, there's power in our vote, there's power in showing up and establishing relationships, and then coming with facts to these meetings. So Black, like the statistics I showed, for example, and presenting that and at these meetings, and then even putting ourselves in positions for those who have the capacity, for those because I commend people who identify as Black that are educators, that are doctors, that are politicians, that because it's work, but putting ourselves in those positions to be the ones to disseminate that money, and then doing so or helping our community get to that point. Like I know one thing that tends to be an issue is like we can have the idea and the vision for mental health, for example, and having a whole organization centered around mental health and be a Black organization, but we don't have some of the paperwork stuff and entirely in order. Some of us, not all, but and so as a result, it can cause us to miss opportunities to secure grants and secure certain contracts from the state, from the federal government, stuff like that. And so either if you're in a position of leadership, educating those who have the idea and who are boots on the ground, and helping them with the backing, which that's what I'm gonna call it, the backing with the paperwork and everything, or learning to ensure that all your ducks are in a row so that you can keep getting these funds to disseminate to the community. That makes sense. So that's some of the things I feel with change, and so I love that I'm in a position to educate those who don't identify as Black that have access to the money. This is why you need to give us money.
Yeah, pretty
Facts.
much.
All
Yeah.
right. So, go ahead, TC.
I
Because I
just have
know
one question.
she has
Yeah.
we do have questions, TC. We have two
Oh, yeah,
questions and
sure.
we have a comment
Okay.
before she has to wrap up.
Yes.
We do
yes.
respect time.
Okay. I'll try to keep it short as possible. I realize in our community also, a lot of times we don't like sharing wealth, meaning like information, like educating each other. I want to know, why is that the case? What do you think about that? Why don't you want to spread information to each other at times?
That's a good question. I feel like it's tied to stigma. Because we have information, but I think I'm answering your question correctly. We have the information, but we don't want to share it. I feel like that's at first it's sad to do. I definitely think that that's the issue. We need to be able to spread the knowledge and education and knowledge, because we can't do all this ourselves, right? And we need to put our egos aside and understand that we're powerful together, and as a community, as there's power in numbers, the whole nine. And just because you spread information to someone else doesn't mean that it's gonna lessen what you got going, if you what you're about, if you're passionate about what you're doing, and if you have an understanding about what it is that you're doing, like, you know what I'm saying. So I feel like when it comes to not disseminating information, it's either tied to ego, but then it's also tied to which needs to be put us under, and just stop. But then also stigma, like if we don't want to share information about mental health, out of like fear of being judged, or out of fear of this fear factor, and that doesn't have to exist anymore, because there's I always like to say, you're not alone if in feeling how you feel and having a mental health condition, for example. So just to hopefully I answered your question.
No, you
Okay.
basically did.
Okay, good.
All
I
right.
felt like I
So
was too part.
okay.
Thank you for that.
All right. So we got three questions
Okay.
and one comment, and then after that we're gonna wrap up, because I know you
I know.
have to go.
Yeah.
I know you
Yes.
have to go.
Yeah,
We,
got
we,
some
we
time.
Yeah,
gotta
Yeah.
get
I
to some
did
time.
experience a loss, so God, and I'm just being transparent, because even me, like as a mental health person, I've had to care for my own mental health. But I said I would still do this today, but I do have to go. So yes, I'll answer each question to the best of my ability. But then you can also reach out to me. Like I am on Instagram. Outside of this, I have my own business, www.spshelle.com, in which reach out to me that way, or follow me on Instagram. It's literally my name. I'm the only one in the world, as far as I know, with the spelling. So reach out to me if you want to continue the conversation, and I can address your question today.
Anything else? How they could connect with you? Email,
Yeah.
Facebook, anything.
Am I able to? Oh, I can't put an account. Yes. www.spshelle.com. One way. My email is spshelle.rutledge. You see my name, so it's literally spshelle.rutledge@gmail.com. Instagram is Spshelle Faith. So my first name, middle name. So if you just type in SPSHELE in like Instagram or online, I pop up.
Also, everyone, she will be on the podcast next month for
I will.
Women's Month.
Yes, I will.
So,
Yes,
FYI.
sir.
I'm here for it
FYI.
too. Yes.
All right. First question. Let's get it.
I think as I mentioned, not knowing how to express our thoughts. What do you think we can do to learn how to express ourselves? I appreciate that. So, learning how to express ourselves first, starting with yourself. So I like to, like, I love to highlight meditation and the empowerment that, and teaching how to do it. I don't have time for it at this moment in time, but it's literally powerful when you can sit with yourself, and even as thoughts come and go, which is normal, that's normal thinking. Taking the time to be present is important. It gives our brains time to rest. So sidebar, but I say this because I feel like the more we get in tune with ourselves and our being and understanding our worth, despite our setbacks, despite what we've experienced, um, the more we'll be confident enough to share our experiences with someone else that we trust, or a trusted friend, family, or therapist, if you want to ensure that word doesn't spread around about your business, because they're not legally obligated to do that, which is why I do like therapy, and I'm gonna keep promoting it throughout this whole podcast. But I definitely think it's being sure with yourself, like, yeah, because that's something I know I had to do. Like, I wasn't comfortable speaking up and out to my therapist or anyone about what I was going through, but as a result, I ended up hospitalized. As a result, I ended up incurring my own mental health conditions and suffering. And that's something else I think back on. If you don't speak up and out, then it will come out in some other way more often than not. And just even if it takes thinking that to help you to speak up and out to someone that you trust, so you don't bottle it inside, and understanding that you're not alone, and there's other people who have gone through what you've gone through, or that are going through what you're going through. If it so I would say, um uh dwelling on those thoughts, uh and just find the courage to speak up and out, but because you want to have your cup full and overrunning, so you can continue to do whatever it is you do for a living, or whatever it is you're passionate about, and show up for your family, your kids, your loved ones, your community. You can't do so from empty half filled cup.
All right.
Okay.
Sabrina, thank you for the comment. Definitely. On the problem, we have to be until people.
For those of you who are only listening, Sabrina Sade wrote, "Oh, she
Go ahead, go
disappeared."
ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. No,
Go ahead,
Sabrina
go ahead,
Sade wrote,
Naron.
"It's definitely too much to focus on the problem. We have to be solution oriented people, so we don't waste our energy on the wrong tactics. Military science is needed to strategize our empowerment."
All
I
right.
like that.
Yeah.
Definitely two more questions. Two more questions, then she has to go, y'all.
I gotta go, yeah.
Let's go.
Rather than reacting aggressively. Rather than reacting aggressively. Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I think I don't think so. When reacting aggressively, I don't think I don't blame people for being mad. And I think that's another
Hmm.
thing. You have the right to be mad. That's a emotion. Being angry, being mad, but as long as it doesn't come out in a form that gets you in trouble, if that makes sense. Like, you're not beating somebody up, you're not, what I'm saying?
Harming
Yeah,
yourself.
but anger
Yeah.
should be expressed, and it is an emotion, and it's a valid one. We have the right to be angry, we have the right, but don't let it consume us to the point that we're not able to carry out what it is that we have been called in this earth to do. Don't let it manifest so much in to the point that it disrupts, the gifts that you have. Like, don't let anger consume you. Be angry, be mad, but formulate and put it into something, and maybe utilize that anger to start a nonprofit, or to contribute to writing your elected officials, for example, to get some matters done, or running for office. Put that energy into something that will be beneficial to yourself, the community, your family, if that makes sense.
Absolutely facts. All right.
Yeah.
Let's get it.
All right. That's it. What do you think of the golden era of our ancestors here operating by spiritual law before foreign invasion? Do you think it's why we're struggling today, because we forgot our spiritual lineage? Personally speaking, what I will say is, I definitely think that where there isn't some type of spiritual background, whether it be Christian, whether it be Egyptian ideologies, like you were saying, it's hard to like we were built on that. we were built on that. Like I recognize the impact. Like obviously during that era we were thriving, and we still are thriving very serious. Don't be mistaken. Just because white supremacy tries to insert itself, we are all powerful. We do need to tap into that, what our ancestors had, and the ancestors that's within us, the ways, because we were mathematicians. Like I said, we were you know, we created various art forms, and have impacted a nation, and even despite all the ways that our culture was stripped many times. And so I do agree that in some way shape or form, like the spiritual component should be within us in some way shape or form. We need that grounding. We need to be able to tap in as a in order to remember and you know, the strengths that our ancestors had. So I hear exactly what you're saying, Sabrina, and I do believe that we need to have some spiritual backing in some way shape or form. I do.
All right, that's about it, y'all. So she has to go now.
I do.
You know, I would say, what's your final thoughts, but she gotta go, y'all. So
Yes,
Hopefully
that's
I
the time.
said them in these questions. I'll have more time next month, y'all. So even if there's some questions from this time that you want, you know, or you want to just ask me them via Instagram. Thank you.
that's
Feel free to reach out to me.
Ashe.
And we will
Yes.
have all your information in the description also, so everybody
Oh,
can
you do
find you.
too? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
All right, that's the end. And that's gonna be the
And thank you
conclusion.
all for the love and everything, and for the condolences.
Yes,
course.
again.
Definitely rocking going.
Yes.
You know, everyone, you know, who's can go condolences. Yeah.
Condolences. We
Prayer
gotta call
hands.
it
Condolences. I'm sorry. I'm
Thanks for the
tongue tied.
laughs too. The laughs
Yeah.
too.
All right, but that's the end of the episode, y'all. You're going to see her next month. Let's
Yep.
get it.
All
Bye.
All right, guys. Have a good one, guys.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please, I really appreciate if you subscribe to the podcast, whether you're on YouTube, Anchor, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google, TuneIn, whatever platform. Please subscribe. Give it a like. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, write a review. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it.